The old town of Edinburgh is incredibly small. It's only half a square mile, the top half of the Royal Mile. Inside that tiny area, the population peaked between 60 and 80,000 people. So we end up with these very narrow closes and wynds, which are surrounded by very tall buildings. The closes and wynds of Old Edinburgh are often named after relevant things. So a building that was there, an occupation that was practiced there, a family that had a house there. This is Borthwick's Close. The Borthwicks were a family of lawyers, and they had a house here. Most famous member of that particular family was a David Borthwick, who in the 16th century managed to get the third husband of Mary Queen of Scots acquitted on a charge of murdering the second husband of Mary Queen of Scots, even though everybody knew he was guilty. So our victim, Henry Stuart Lord Darnley. He was tall, he was handsome, oh, he was a charmer when he wanted to be. Mary was head over heels in love. This was going to be perfect. Everybody else had spotted a few problems with Darnley. For a start, he's not nearly so charming when he's not trying to seduce you and become King of Scots. He was also half English, and that didn't play well in Scotland. And he was the wrong religion. So most people in Scotland at this time were Protestant Christians. Darnley was a Roman Catholic Christian. Now, Mary herself was Roman Catholic, so as far as she's concerned, Darnley's religion is an advantage. But her Parliament were not happy. They were just about coping with the fact that their Protestant country had a Roman Catholic queen, but they definitely wanted her marrying a Protestant man and having lots of little Protestant babies for their succession. But Mary was not to be reasoned with, and the wedding went ahead. So about 5 minutes after the ink was dry on the marriage contract, Darnley showed his true colours. A drinker, a gambler, promiscuous with, well, just about anybody pretty with a pulse, to be honest. Unfortunately, by the time Mary accepted this was really what he was like, it was too late. She was already pregnant. Now, divorce was possible in 16th century Scotland, and it was actually relatively common. But the trouble with divorce back then was it didn't say, this marriage existed and has finished. It said, this marriage was never good in the first place. So if she had divorced Darnley, she would have cast doubts on whether the child she was carrying was legitimate or not. So she's kind of stuck with him. So her council made a few noises about, well, he spends all his evenings in taverns and in gambling dens, doesn't he? Rough places, those. Anything could happen. Now, Mary flat refused to be involved in a plot to murder her husband. She's a good Catholic girl. She had been advised that murder is a mortal sin, and she's also heard that hell isn't a terribly nice place to end up. So while Darnley is bad, hell is probably going to prove to be worse. So she's not keen on that as a solution. Darnley, meanwhile, was making enemies. The Scottish Parliament wouldn't give him the title of King of Scots, and rather than trying to make friends and make deals to get what he wanted, he just stormed around the place, throwing tantrums, shouting at everybody and stamping his feet. So possibly, if you had travelled to the very, very far north of Scotland, to, say, the Shetland Isles or somewhere, and found somebody who hadn't met him yet, you might have found somebody who didn't want to murder him. But anyway, when he got murdered, everybody knew that the Earl of Bothwell had done it. Darnley's family were completely convinced that there was going to be a cover-up of the crime. So they wrote a letter to Scotland's Parliament demanding that the Earl of Bothwell be put on trial immediately. At this point, our lawyer, David Borthwick here, steps forward. I'll see you in court tomorrow, then. And Darnley's family are like, not quite that quickly. I mean, we need to sort out our evidence, we need to get our witnesses in order, we need actually still to appoint an advocate to represent us in the court. Can you give us a week or two? Well, no, actually, sorry, I can't, you see, because I've got this letter here, and that is definitely your signature on it, isn't it? And it clearly says to put him on trial immediately. So I will see you in court tomorrow. No witnesses, no evidence, no advocate. Bothwell is, of course, acquitted. At this point, the Scots have had enough. She's only gone and married a murderer this time. I mean, this woman has lousy taste in husbands. And anyway, by this point, they've got an alternative because she's had the baby. They've got little Prince James, and he can be King of Scots. And the Scottish nobility actually quite like it when their king or queen is an infant. Because the problem with adult monarchs is they do have an irritating habit of having opinions and policies of their own. When you have a baby lying in a cradle, all you need to do is keep the milk and the teddy bears coming, and you have got 17 years to do whatever you like before they grow up and start interfering again. So, brilliant. Civil war erupts. Mary and Bothwell are defeated. Mary famously flees into England and throws herself on the mercy of her cousin Elizabeth I of England. Bothwell, meanwhile, flees into Norway, forgetting that in his youth he had been in Norway, he had married a Norwegian girl, he had stolen her family's money, and he had run away. Now, he's forgotten all about this. This is just one bad deed in a whole lifetime of bad deeds as far as he's concerned. But oddly enough, the girl and her family remembered the incident quite clearly. So as soon as his ship landed in Norway, he was arrested and he ended his life in the bottom of a dungeon in Scandinavia. So there was justice, but it did not happen in Scotland.